hand over to you. Thank you so much.
Sorry guys about that. Technical issues, but I'm here and we're good to go.
So let me introduce you. Guys, I'm honored to be joined by Sandrine Bardot. I think I say that correctly.
Yes, perfect.
Sandrine is an HR expert in Dubai, originally obviously from France. She does consulting in reward, compensation, all of these kind of things in obviously the HR space. However, as I said earlier, the basis for anything that we do in HR starts with the job description, job analysis, and I've asked her to join us to discuss that and to give us some background on that, a brief overview. So Sandrine, background to our class, obviously it's an MBA class. The students there is a handful of them that are actually in HR, that are HR professionals, but for the most part, it's general managers, general employees, obviously looking with the MBA to climb the career ladder and to get to a point where they can also influence business decisions and all that. So this will be a high-level overview on job descriptions and all that kind of stuff. So I'm going to hand it over to you. Thank you so much for joining us.
My pleasure.
I'm looking forward to hearing, even myself, what you have to share with us.
Okay, super. So let me try to share my screen. You need to enable that for me, please.
Yes, let me do that. Great, you should be able to do that now.
Okay, super. Screen. Share. PowerPoint. Okay, so thank you first of all for having me. Can you see my slide just to confirm to me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, super. Okay, so today I'm going to be talking, as Cohen was saying, I'm going to be talking about job evaluations and job descriptions. And I'd like one part of it to be more of a discussion. I'll show some of the changes and I will ask you what your thoughts are in terms of the current changes that are taking place. So basically, when we look at the world of HR, but also the world of comp and ben, which is my specific area of expertise, we see that the total reward strategy is part of something which is bigger. It has to fit with the organization, culture and strategy, what the business wants to achieve, and of course, what is the HR strategy that has been derived from that. And then the total reward strategy covers all aspects of what we give to an employee in exchange for their work. That's how I define it to people who don't know what comp and ben is. So it goes through compensation, which is the cash aspect of the packages. So anything which can be valued as cash, the benefits, which are things that you receive, such as healthcare and so on. Of course, your performance management and the recognition, and everything which has to do with work-life balance, employee well-being, and so on. All the career development opportunities in the past few years have also been integrated into this definition of what the total rewards package is. And the purpose of that is to make sure that we have employees that are happy, that are engaged, because there have been significant surveys that have been done and analysis that have been done, research, which demonstrates that an organization where employees are satisfied and engaged is an organization that gets better financial results, better performance. So how does all that come? The first step to so many things in comp and ben as well in HR, as Cohen was saying, is the job descriptions, because if you want to create your salary structures, if you want to create your job architecture and so on, you need to have good way of describing your jobs and of evaluating them, which is to give them a relative value from one to another, so that you know in terms of position in the organization where they stand. So in terms of job descriptions and job evaluations, if we look at how defining work is important, it's a huge part of people management. Why? Because how we define work links to how we recruit people, who we select, how we train them, how we develop them. If we don't know what's expected of a role, how can we do performance management if we don't have an idea of how the job should be performed? And if we don't have that, we cannot reward people on their individual performance or value their contribution with respect to an initial expectation. So it's very important that right from the beginning, we have the right way of defining work. So in terms of, if you will, the current language which is used for job descriptions and job evaluations, you will hear a lot of wording now called job architecture. And in the past, it was just job descriptions, but actually it covers a little bit more. So the job architecture framework is the concept that you're going to use to define and structure how jobs are organized within your company. So for example, the type of functions, okay, so that can be finance, HR, or marketing. Then you would have a job family, which is within the job function. They represent similar types of jobs. So for example, in accounting, in finance, you might have accountants, you might have auditors, you might have tax people. Those would be the job families. And within the job families, you will have the job titles that show what the person is doing. And I urge you to always have a job code. This is really, really important, rarely discussed in organizations, but the job coding, especially if your organization becomes, let's say, either a multinational or becomes diversified in terms of industry, the job codes is something which will allow you to compare jobs across the different parts of your organization and to identify where each position is located. So I used to work in Microsoft, for example, many years ago, and a job code for us would have first a two-letter coding for the country. Then we had 3 different types of salary structures. So we had a coding for that, and then we had a coding for the grade, and then we had a series of letters that would describe the job family and the job title. So that was really important, because if you think that you have employees in, let's say, over 100 countries, obviously you want to be able to communicate from one country to another. A lot of jobs are being repeated, and to make sure, but they might have a different title. But the job code allows you to say, hey, actually this job is the same as that other job, or it's a different one. So that's the job architecture framework, allows you to define the jobs in a logical manner. Next to it, what you are gonna have is the career framework, which allows how jobs and employees will progress across the different job families and the different job functions. Okay, so this will help to manage career later on. Okay, and of course you have what's described here as job role and job level. The role is a higher level type of not grading, but type of position. So you would have, for example, management, you would have white collars or blue collars, for example, or admin staff and technical staff. And then you have your pay framework, which is also linked to how the jobs have been evaluated, where what you do is that you link the way that the jobs have been described and evaluated to a salary structure, which makes a compilation, if you will, of the salary ranges. So the salary range or the salary grade, for each grade in your company, you're gonna have a specific salary level, which you will deem to be competitive for your organization. So you will say that's what you call the minimum to maximum of salary for a certain grade. And for example, if you will think, you might have 2 employees on the same grade, but if one is in sales and the other one is not in sales, they might be on 2 different salary structures, because in sales you will have more variable pay. So typically the basic pay and the monthly salary is lower than somebody on the same level who would not be a salesperson. So you would have two salary structures and two different ways of paying for people who are on the same grade. So once you have this job architecture, it's the basis for everything that you're going to do, because you have, of course, your job architecture, your codes, your titles, the functions, the job families, your grades. And from there, what you can do is design your global career framework. You will be able to do workforce analytics. You will be able to do performance management. You will be able to do career management or talent management. You'll be able to do your succession management. So this is really the founding block for everything. So what do you need in order to put that in place? You need job descriptions, because they, as the building block, what they're going to do, they allow you to do a job evaluation, which means that it allows you to compare two jobs from two different job families and give them a specific, let's say, value that allows you to position them in the salary structure. You will be able to use the job description to compare to what's happening in the market in terms of salaries. That's called market pricing. You will be able to do performance evaluations. You will be able to do your org charts properly and make sure that you cover all aspects of what the organization needs to perform. You will be able to assess your training needs and your development needs. You will be able, as I was saying saying earlier, to do your career development and your succession planning. So really, you need to focus the first thing on job descriptions. And I know that a lot of managers don't like job descriptions because they think it's an admin work. But once you really understand how fundamental that is to so many things in how we work in HR and how we support the business, you really need to pay attention to it. So there are different formats for job descriptions, okay? And the most, let's say, known ones was based on the Hay model. And it has a certain number of elements in it, which is some basic information about the job, who it reports to, and so on. The job purpose, which is the main reason why the job is existing in the organization. In the Hay job description system, you have dimensions. So that would be, for example, the number of people who are reporting to that position and the budget which is managed by that position. That helps to also evaluate later on the job. Then you would have the key accountabilities, which is the main content of the job description, where you describe what's expected from the job. And you would have next to them the key performance indicators, which is how do you measure if that the success of the job holder in the position. And of course, you would have communication, working relationships, you know, like how difficult it is, at which level the position is interacting, how complex the communication needs to be, and the qualifications, the experience, and the skills. So those are things that you will find in most of the job descriptions that exist in today's world. So if you're going to do a good job description, okay, you need to focus on where you're going and not where you've been. So basically, when you're doing a job description, you want to explain to an employee what they need to do and what are the opportunities for them. So the kind of responsibilities that will bring them to achieve value for the organization and grow for themselves, okay? What you need to do is use bullet points and use a very direct language. We'll come into more details about that. And here I have listed a few resources with some examples and so on, where you can find some descriptions, job descriptions, and so on. I will, by the way, share those slides with you after the session. For things that you need to avoid when you're writing a job description, please get away from the mumbo jumbo, I call it. Basically, all these kind of so-called good corporate language that we're supposed to use, like leverage synergies and cross-pollinate talent. I mean, this doesn't represent really what people are doing. So it's better to explain what people are really doing, and also not be completely unrealistic in terms of requirements for the job. Okay, you have to describe the job as it can be held by somebody who has the required degree of experience and the qualifications for the job, and who is a good performer, not the outstanding performer, the best performer in the whole organization. Okay, so how do you communicate to your employees what's expected from their role? Okay, first of all, the job description should be written. Okay, it shouldn't be verbal. Okay, and the managers need to communicate to the employees how they understand the job accountabilities. Okay, and one way which is totally underused by most organizations to maintain the job descriptions up to date and alive is at the beginning of the year, when you're setting the objectives for the year during your performance planning exercise, to come back to the job description and just make sure, does it need to be changed a little bit, have some responsibilities changed, is there still a good understanding, has the person grown in their job, and therefore you can expect something more from them and you can put more job accountabilities for them. So what happens when job descriptions are put in place? What you see is obviously you're going to use them for recruitment. The job descriptions that you write for internal use are not the same ones as the ones that are used for recruitment. Typically, when you see a job description that is put out there for recruitment purposes, you will see also a description of the company culture. There might be some elements of what the package might entail, even if it's not detailed. But you might have an element of that, and you will have maybe sometimes also some of the main expectations in terms of short-term objectives for that position to be achieved. I always feel it's a little bit weird to see that the job descriptions that are done by the recruitment team don't always fit with the job descriptions that the rest of HR is using. So my advice to you is that if you already have a database of job descriptions that exists in your organization, and you have a recruitment team which is active in recruiting, you should try to coordinate with them to see the job descriptions that they come up with, and see if you cannot use some of that to either update your database of job description or to correct what they're putting out to the world, so that they don't recruit people that end up having a set of expectations that might not be aligned to the reality of what the organization is doing. The other thing which I want to just spend just 1 minute on is the people who are going to tell you, because you're going to meet them, it's not in my job description. So you want to give them some work to do, and they start by reacting, they refuse it, and they say it's not part of my job, it's not in my job description. So personally, I have zero tolerance for this kind of behavior. So I've had some very tough conversations with some employees. But I would say that an employee who reacts like that, you need to also question if you didn't make some mistakes with your own job descriptions. For example, if your job descriptions were to say, I don't know, let's imagine it's a junior accountant that needs to do data entry. If you wrote in the job description that the person needs to do data entry using I don't know, let's say Oracle software, okay, and later on the system changes in the organization and you're moving to SAP, for example, and they tell you, no, it's not my job, we're in transition, my job is to use Oracle, it's not to use SAP. And trust me, I've had that exact, actually it's not an invented situation, it's one that I actually faced at some point in my career. It's because your job description was too much focused on the task and not so much about what are the objectives and what are the expected outcomes of the job. A job description is not here to describe the task in the sense of saying the person needs to take this box, open the lid, pick out one of those and then use it to put the papers together. No, the description should be about that the person, the job holder, should ensure that the documents are put together in a secure manner, but does not describe how the person is supposed to do that, because technology changes, job task changes, and so on. So be careful to not be focused too much on describing tasks in your job description, but to try to make sure that you're going to be looking at describing what is the purpose of the job. So
can I jump in there just with
sure.
a quick question?
Sure.
That's in the chat box at the moment.
Yes.
So what you're describing, in my experience, is very, very typical of Namibian HR setup. You have this job description that's 100 years old, and nobody's updated it. Nobody's sort of re-looked at the KPIs and the job activities and all that. And then the job description finishes with this line printed in italics, starting with an asterisk saying, and all other duties that your manager allocates to you.
Yes.
So the question in the chat box is, where do we draw the line between the allocation of any other duties and actually abusing the employees? I think maybe to rephrase the question differently, at what stage does that job maybe become a different role, maybe get a different grading? How much additional duties can we add as a manager without abusing the person doing the job?
Okay. So I don't think there is like a theoretical answer to that. What I would say is that if you're changing the role or the job content for one person only, and you have multiple people on your team that are supposed to do the same job, as an HR, if you see that the manager is doing that, you need to start questioning if this is something personal or not personal. So we're talking here about equity. If that is changing for everybody at the same time, it could be that there's a new technology coming, there's a new manager coming who has a different set of expectations. If they are changing it for everybody at the same time, then that might not necessarily be a problem. It might be the case that you need to review the job descriptions at that point in time. So as an HR, you say, hey, are you changing the content or the role and responsibilities of the employees? Let's update the job descriptions and let's see if the job evaluation is still the same. And then potentially we might have to take some other actions, such as changing some people's grades or changing some salaries and so on. That would be, let's say, a consequence of that. Now, on a day-to-day basis, if the job description, as I was just trying to say 2 minutes ago, is too much focused on describing tasks and not outcomes that are expected from the role, and describes every single task as if an employee who's, especially for somebody who works in an office, you describe the task as if they're working, I don't know, on a manufacturing line, where the jobs are super detailed to the task, because it's like you take this, sorry, I don't know the English for it, but you take you take a hammer, you hammer on that nail until it's done, then you go to the other side, you hammer on the nail on the opposite side. That's what you do for a blue-collar position, but in an office setting, you cannot go to that level of description. So people should always expect that there is going to be some variation in the job that they're asked to deliver versus what they let's say actually do. But generally speaking, if you think that a job is going to change for, let's say, about 20% of its content, and I'm not talking of the small things that might add up, you know, like you need to spend a little bit more time on your emails and so on, but like new tasks that are added or some tasks that are taken away, then once you see that it's about 15 to 20%, you should raise the alarm as an HR or as a line manager to say, hey, we need to update the job description. Typically, I would say the threshold, I will put it at 15%, and I will tell you why. I remember when I started my career back in 1993, many years ago, basically, I had a training on the Hay job evaluation methodology, and I still remember what they taught me. And they were explaining that how they were grouping the points from the Hay job evaluation was by grouping them in clusters of about 15%, because there is something in the brain where the human mind is able to perceive difference when there is 13% of nuance between two states. So 2 shades of blue or 2 shades of green, for example, green, let me take, green is blue and yellow, okay, mixed together. So if you add more yellow, you add 15% more, it will make a change in the color. The eye will start to see it when there starts to be 15% of color difference. When we touch something, for example, even the skin, or some surface, we can feel a difference of 15% in the roughness or the smoothness of whatever we are touching. Even the ear, when you do tests for the ears, we can hear different sounds, and by increments of 15% as well. So at the time when they designed the Hay job evaluation method, they said we will group by 15% because that's where people start to really see a difference. And if you look back into how HR was managed a few years ago, when maybe before the 2008 crisis, when salaries were maybe moving a little bit better than they are now, what people would receive as a typical salary increase at the time for a promotion was 15% on their base pay. And why? Because if you don't get 15%, you get to a point where people don't really make the difference. So if you give them 5% and tell them, great, you're getting a promotion, the person might not actually feel that they have been rewarded, because the mind doesn't perceive. It's not that they don't want to see it, it's just our mind is not made for that. So if I take that 15%, I would say if you evaluate that a job content is evolving by about 15%, it might be time to redo the job description, or maybe not redo it, but at least update it so that it reflects the new reality, because it's a change which is significant enough for that.
Great, thank you.
Is there any other question at this stage?
Maybe not a question, but a comment from my side. And again, this is something I've seen, you know, when you do recruitment, and then they're looking for somebody similar to what your previous slide was saying, you know, somebody who knows and understands, you know, some sort of HR system plus interior decorating and all this kind of stuff.
Yes.
And what I see is maybe, you know, somebody quit, and all of a sudden the HR person kind of takes over those responsibilities. And it's something completely different, you know, like HR and buildings management. And then when I recruit, they're looking for an HR person with building management experience. And the two things aren't related. You know, finance and IT, you know, they want somebody with an IT degree and a chartered accountant qualification, you know. So it's and that's what happens when we don't update.
I agree, and I think it's also happening when the organization doesn't have a strong either workforce planning or OD element to it. So if you don't have a strong like organization chart and the description of the jobs, you will come to descriptions that don't necessarily make sense. And I can understand it. As an organization, you want only the best of the best. So you go like, wow, even if this person had this and this and that. But then in the end, it might look, you know, I wish I had kept that picture. I once saw somebody who had a kid who had decorated a Christmas tree. And the kid's Christmas tree was so full of so many things because he liked every single bauble and so on, but it didn't make any sense. While a more pared down tree is actually more aesthetically pleasing and will better serve its purpose because it's not going to be an eyesore. And I think we tend to be attracted as an organization to people who are, and you might find that one person, maybe there is one or maybe there are two, but they're not what the organization needs. Because if an organization relies on somebody who's so unique to do the job, it puts itself at a massive risk in terms of succession management, later on in terms of performance management, in terms of what if that person has all those great skills but actually has a terrible behavior. I remember when I was with Microsoft, we had some issues with some of the top sales guys at one point where to a point where we actually needed to change a lot of things, including the sales incentive plan for a whole job family on a global basis, because the behaviors we had recruited superstars. They were super aggressive. They were bringing millions of dollars, but the clients were not happy by the methods. And so what do you do in a case like that? Because you're like, hey, okay, he's my top performer, but he's bringing a lot of money, but is he good for the organization? What impact does that have on the other employees and so on? So you don't necessarily want those, you want people that are good, but you don't necessarily want people that are unicorns, you know, or we call it in French, the duck with a duck with 3 legs, you know, like instead of 2. So maybe there is one somewhere, but is he the one that you really need? Not necessarily.
Yeah.
Okay. So let me go back to my screen. Okay. So the next steps, once you've done your job descriptions. By the way, I will include a few things in the job descriptions for the job descriptions in the slides that you will receive. But I think there are so many things I wanted to discuss. The job description is the basis for job evaluation. So what is job evaluation? Is a way which is systematic, not random, to determine the value of a job with respect to other jobs in the company. Okay, so it's trying to be systematic in how it compares the jobs to be able to eventually establish a pay structure which makes sense. So I'm going to take you through, a number of situations. So if, for example, I show you this very simple org chart, I'm sorry, it's kind of an Arab org chart here because I'm based in Dubai. So you have a CEO, you have a sales director who has 2 salespeople, you have a production director who has 6 operators, and then you have the finance director who has 2 part-time accounting clerks, okay, reporting to them. So just take a second and try to think who between the 3 directors do you think is the one that has the most important job, like the highest level of job?
Production.
Okay, production. So great. Let me try to see if I can see who's talking to me.
It's
okay.
Kala.
Okay, so Kala, why would you say that?
I think a job which has, if the task force is bigger, you'd say that the tasks are more than the others. I'd like to think.
Okay, more tasks and more people also reporting to him, or does that have anything to do, do you think?
When you've got more people under your control, it puts you at a more senior position in terms of this, in this company, I would like to think. Okay. And also given the type of job he's got, or his title, you think that everything runs around him. The finance director has got 2 part-time guys, which seems as though he's one of the least stressed, or there's less work that he has to do compared to the others.
Okay, interesting. Thank you. Does anybody think that Maher, the sales director, should be the one that has the highest grade? Anybody?
My view, the great positioning should not necessarily depend possibly on how many people are reporting under you, but more on the job content. I would possibly pronounce myself better if I am informed on the job content of an individual.
Okay, so that would drive you to select which position to be maybe the one which is more senior between the directors.
From the face value, And in the absence of the job content, I'll also go with the production director.
Okay, okay. Anybody else thinks it could be the sales director or the finance director, and why?
Yeah, I think I'm going with the sales director.
Okay.
Yeah, because in this case.
Okay, Saki, you finish, and then is it Meki who wants to speak next?
Yes,
so, Saki
yes.
First. Saki first. Let him finish, please.
Okay.
Okay, I'm going with the sales director because I'm of the opinion that he determines what the company will have to sell, and then the production manager takes over from him.
Okay. Okay. And Meki?
I think production director, specifically because the others wouldn't exist if that function was not there. The others would not necessarily be there. So from the perspective of it is a production director, the others are sort of linked to them. The others are support functions to the production director.
Okay. Okay. Anybody who feels it should be the finance director, and why?
I'm feeling it. All of the directors are all equally important. You couldn't have one in the absence of others. So I would love to say they are all equally important.
Okay. Okay. Anybody else?
I'm also of the same
Yes.
view that all the directors are at the same level.
Okay. Okay.
I'm of the opinion that the sales director is more important because he is directing the face of the companies. These are the people who speaks directly to the client, and they are portraying the image of the organization. If they misbehave, it's a done deal.
Okay.
If they portray an image that is not correct or something, then regardless of how many products they have, customers are not coming. I think the sales director is more important.
Okay, interesting. So, okay, I'm gonna just close the discussion here. And I'm gonna give you 3 examples of how people, based on this org chart, could react. So there is the first reaction, which is to say, hey, production is very important because if you don't have anything to sell, then nobody can be there. And this position has 6 direct reports, so that position should be more important. You could also have somebody who says, actually, it should be the sales director, because even though he only has 2 salespeople, they're the ones who are bringing the revenue. And without income, no company can survive, and they cannot even produce if there is no cash coming in. And you could also have somebody who says, well, actually, it should be the finance director, because without a good way of doing the finance, the taxes, making sure that people are paid, because finance in a situation like that would be doing the payroll, we cannot run the organization. And often a CFO is going to be the right hand to a CEO. So there are some people who could say that it's actually the finance director that has the more important job. And I would say that all those arguments are potentially right, and all those solutions are potentially right, just as is the fact of saying, no, they're all directors, so they should all be at the same level because they're all important for the organization. So it's really important, as you can see, that you don't just rely on an org chart to tell you which positions are more important, because it comes to having a certain number of criteria, which allows you to compare from one job to the other to come to a conclusion which is not based on your perception, but which is based on facts and criteria which are the same across all the jobs, so that you can compare all the jobs. And it could be that some jobs are higher on certain criteria, lower on others, and vice versa. And in the end, they might end up at the same level, but for different reasons. And that's all right. So what does the job evaluation, we'll dig into some methods of job evaluation, but I want to show you. Job evaluation lets you have a clear ranking of positions. If you look on the left side of the screen, what you will see is that there is an org chart where you have the leading position, and then you have in green all the people who report directly to that position, and then in orange the positions that report to those directors. But if you look at it from a point of view of having done a job evaluation, okay, so that's represented, the grades are represented in the blue arrow on the right, the vertical blue arrow. What you will see is that some of those direct reports to the leader are higher level than others. And you even see here in this level -2 orange one, a person who reports to a direct report of the CEO being actually in a higher grade than other directors who report directly to the leadership position. So the grading allows you to see that, let's say, relative worth of the positions, irrespective of what the reporting line is. That's very important, because reporting line is not all. And let me give you an example that everybody will understand. The assistant or the secretary to the CEO reports directly to the CEO, but nobody would even think that she's at the same level of responsibility as the CFO or the head of marketing or the direction of production or the director of sales. But from a reporting line, it's just one level away from the CEO. So as you can see, the reporting line does not always show you the real responsibility level of the position, okay? So when you see that, you take that org chart that was on the previous page, what you would see is that you can add your job architecture on top of the structure, because you would see that, for example, you would have directors, which is just for the first level, the pink L, and then you have what you consider to be managers, are for those positions where it's mostly some green, and then you have one person who's at a manager level but does not have direct reports. So maybe that's a high-level expert or somebody who is a project manager who doesn't have direct report but manages complex projects with people from other teams reporting to him on a functional basis, not on a hierarchical basis. And then you have the individual contributor level for the orange mostly, where people don't have other positions reporting to them. So you can combine the two, and that helps you to have some kind of clarity onto the different levels. So why do you want to evaluate jobs? You want to have an organizational structure which is common. You want to be able to participate to salary surveys, to benchmark your salaries. You want to have consistency into how the jobs are positioned compared to one another. And also, it's easier to communicate to the employees, because the employees will perceive more fairness if you use a proper job evaluation methodology, rather than just you saying, hey, we know this job is higher than this one or that other one. If you think about it, very small family-owned organizations or startups or companies that are in their first few years typically don't really have a job evaluation structure in place. But once they start to reach a certain size, people start to see or perceive, at least, if there are unfairness between the employees, like the CEO is favoring this person, giving them a bigger job or a bigger title than others. The job evaluation allows you to eliminate this kind of perception. And you have to, whether the perception is correct or not, by the way, because you have to understand that in human resources, and especially when it comes to career, to pay, to job evolution and so on, perception is more important than the reality. Because if people perceive things are okay and they might not be actually okay, you will not have too much unrest in your organization and you have time to fix your problems. But if people perceive problems where there are no problems, you have a huge risk on your hands, and you need to take care of it very quickly, because you will have decrease in employee engagement and so on in your organization. So it's important that you do the job evaluation. So there are different methods of job evaluations. You can do a ranking, which is where you take each job and you compare it to every single other jobs in the organization. I will show you a slide. You have the job to scale comparison. So basically, that's the one which goes to the job architecture level. You say, this is an executive, this is a management, this is an individual contributor, this is an unskilled staff, and that's where you keep it. Or you can have the point factor, which is the most common job evaluation method, where you use a certain set of criteria, the same for all jobs, and you put a value against each criteria for each job, and then you end up with a certain number of points, and the points determine what grade the job is going to be. So when do you do large grading projects? You typically have triggers for that, and I think that's a shame, by the way. But typically what happens is that every organization, once they reach a certain size, will do a big job evaluation project every 6 to 8 years on average. Why? Typically, there's a big organization redesign or a big transformation. The strategy is changing. You're introducing new systems which change the way that people work. Or you're all of a sudden facing an increase or a decrease in your employee turnover. You could have also external factors, like you're acquiring a company or being acquired. You're getting into new markets or new services, new countries. You might have pressure for cost control. You might have changes into the regulations which make you change the way that you do the work. Or you could have a talent shortage, okay, which means that you need to figure out really for your critical talent where they need to be in your organization. Those will typically combine. It's usually one or multiple of those factors that will lead to a big grading project, where you will take all those old job descriptions that have typically not been updated for the past 5 to 8 years, and then rewrite them all, and then job evaluate them and create a new grading structure. I think it's a shame because it should be done on an ongoing basis, but most organizations, because they go through so much pain of doing the big project, they don't want to maintain it, because just a word of saying job description and job evaluation, everybody goes like, oh no, this project was so much, and they don't want to do it even for some updates, which is a shame, because then a few years down the line, what they have to do is, instead of taking care of it in half an hour, then they now need to spend a few months just working on that, because they need to review the whole organization at once. That's a bit of a shame. For me, to be honest, as a consultant, it's great. It gives me job, but honestly, for organizations, it's not the best way to go. So what's the end result of job evaluation? So what you will receive from Hay, for example, this is an old example, but would show you the Hay reference level, which is the grade. It shows to you to how many points, Hay points, the end result is coming, and then some examples of job titles. So this is an old one. They probably have changed it a little bit. But let's say if we take a Hay reference 13, you see that it's a job that has been evaluated between 228 and 268 points. And that would be an entry-level professional or senior accountant, for example. Okay, so if you look at a 17, that would be 439 to 518 job points. And now we're talking about either senior engineers or project managers, for example. So you're at the border of getting maybe managerial positions there. So as you can see, this is the kind of stuff that you're going to receive once you've done your job evaluation exercise in the organization. Mercer presents it in a different way, so does Towers Watson. You will have those slides. I don't want to show you too much, but what I want to make you think about is that in reality, job descriptions and job evaluations are not really different based on the different methodologies. If you think about it, and I intentionally show this as a screenshot, okay. I remember when I was working, this is an old one, I was working with a tech company at the time. I was still in the corporate world, and we were participating in multiple salary surveys. And you know, the big providers, they're gonna come to you. So let's say Towers Watson, Willis Towers Watson, or Korn Ferry Hay will come to you and say, you need to use our job evaluation methodology in order to participate in our survey. they try to sell you basically that you need to do the job evaluation project with them, because those projects are worth literally millions. Okay, they're super, super expensive when you go through one of the large consultancies. But that's not true, because in reality, there are what is called Rosetta Stone. We used to call it the Rosetta Stone when I was in Microsoft, which is this kind of correspondence table between the grades of the different main job evaluation methodologies. So for example, here, if I look at a grade 20 in Hay, okay, in this third column, a grade 20 in Hay would be an equivalent of a grade 59 or 60 in Mercer IPE method, a 16 in Towers-Watson, or a 9 in Hewitt. Sorry, let me get back. So why? Because in reality, it's easy to make a comparison between them. And all the survey providers have that correspondence table. So they might tell you no, that they don't have it. But if you tell them, I'm not going to participate in your salary survey if you don't give me that correspondence table, because dear Mercer, I'm using the Hay method for my jobs, trust me, all of a sudden, they will tell you, I shouldn't be showing it to you, but here's a correspondence table that everybody has. Okay, they all have it. So don't let them try to impress on you that their systems are producing results that are that different, because as you can see, you can have a correspondence. It's not a perfect correspondence because each method is a bit different, but it's good enough that it allows you to participate to a salary survey from another provider. So let's imagine you're using Hay for your job evaluation, but if you look in your country and your industry, Mercer has more of the companies that are in your industry and that are your competitors for talent. So you want to participate to the Mercer salary survey in order to build your salary structure. So, and you don't want to redo all your job evaluations. Use that table to be able to participate in the Mercer survey by having that correspondence with your own internal grades based on Hay, so that you can still get those results. You don't need to change your methodology because of that. So why is that? Because most of the job evaluation methodologies remain the same, are based on similar concepts. They look at two main things: the context of the job and the content of the job. The context is what is the budget which is managed, the type of organization is it? Is it a private company? Is it a semi-government entity? Is it a government entity? It looks at the kind of industry and the main purpose of that organization. And then it looks at the content of the job, which is what's the job purpose, what are the main accountabilities for the job, what kind of experience and skills are required for the job, and what kind of responsibilities or dimensions does the job have in terms of number of reports and so on. Given that most organizations give a different name to those categories, but actually evaluate jobs on similar criteria. Why? Because a job is a job is a job. And when you want to compare two jobs, you look at those overarching criteria, which are going to be the same criteria irrespective of what the job is doing. So it can be valid looking at dimensions, accountability, skills, and organization structure works as well for an R&D position, a manufacturing position, and a sales position. They will have different values on each of those, but those criteria allow you to compare jobs that are not doing the same thing in a way which is objective and therefore ends up with points that are comparable irrespective of which evaluation method you choose in your organization. So what do you do once all the jobs are evaluated? You can put them together, create your grades, and create your pay structures. So looking at values in the market, participating in salary surveys, and salary surveys also cover benefits and incentives, the good ones, so that you know what the market is paying. You can do your career frameworks. You can design HR policies that are related to grade. So it could be, for example, to whom you give a company car and to whom you give a job car. Those are two different things. The job car could be, for example, for a technician who needs to go on site at the client site, or for a salesperson. But the company car is typically something which is more of a perk for senior management to say, hey, you have an important job, we give you a company car. It's not linked to the job, it's linked to the status of the employee. So that allows you to define this kind of policy, that allows you to define who's eligible for what kind of benefits and so on. It allows you to start your succession planning, because now you know that if you have somebody that you identify as a successor, let's say to a director, but this person is still an individual contributor, they're not going to be fit for taking the director job. You will need to plan some time where you put them first through a management job before they can become replace the director, so you can start your succession planning. Okay, so it's very important that you look into that once you've done your all your job evaluations. And then finally, once you've done the job evaluation, what you need to look at is the person and the position. Because when you do a job evaluation, it's based on the job in general, it's not based on the individual who's on the job. But you might have, so your employees might already have a grade, but that grade might not fit completely with the grade from the job evaluation. Look at this example in the second column here. You see that the direct report, let's say to the CEO or to the director, the position is on a certain grade, but actually the job holder in blue here is 1 grade higher. Okay, so you will have to deal with that. What do you do with somebody in that kind of situation where they are themselves on a grade which is higher than that of the job? And one of his direct reports, as you can see, that person is personally 1 grade lower than what the job should be. So you will have to, once you've done your job evaluation, look at the grades of the employees and make some decisions as to whether you want to maintain them in their current grade, whether you want to promote them because maybe they were under grade compared to where the job is, or maybe they're not ready yet for that job, they've just been promoted and they were 2 grades lower, so they need to have an intermediate step. You might have the case of the people who are overgraded personally compared to that of the job. In that case, you need to decide, what do I do for that employee? And most importantly, when that employee changes job, is transferred somewhere else, don't give them a promotion. For example, that person in that second column, the manager here, you might say, hey, later on, he might transfer to another position, this one which is on the right here. Then you put him there. You don't change their grade because now they're going to be in the right grade compared to the job. And the new person that you recruit, you don't put in the grade of the old person, you put them in the right grade for the job. So you will have to prepare a little bit how you manage the full implementation and full alignment of the persons and the positions that they're holding. Anybody has any question at that point? Hello?
There's a question in the chat box here. I'm going to read it as it is. Do we expect a linguistic lecturer to be remunerated the same as an electronic engineering lecturer, giving the equivalent qualifications and experiences? I think yes.
Do we expect, I'm sorry, can you repeat the question? Do we expect to pay the same for which position and which position?
So we've got a linguistic lecturer, somebody in the languages, and an engineering lecturer, somebody in engineering, equivalent qualification experience.
Ah, okay. So I would say that maybe yes and maybe no. I'm sorry, I'm not able to give you an answer on that one. Why? The grade might be the same, but if you think what I was saying in the beginning, if you look at the market, you might have some very, very different ways of paying those 2 positions. Maybe one of them is very difficult to find, like the linguistic one, and the engineer one is easy to find because there are lots of engineers in the market, and so you can find lots of people to teach it. So that would make maybe the pay for the engineer one to be less than for the linguistic one. You might also have a consideration inside your own organization about what is core or fundamental to the future of your organization versus what is just, let's say, standard for your organization. So I will give you another example. When I was, again, with Microsoft. So at the time, Microsoft in most countries had two salary structures, one for sales and one for the rest of the organization. But we also had, globally, 5 research and development centers. We were talking many years ago. Those R&D centers were reporting directly to Bill Gates, who was the chairman at the time. He was already not the CEO. It was Steve Ballmer. And we had very different salary positioning for those roles of the R&D than we did the rest of the organization. And I was very lucky because in my region, I had 3 of the 5 global R&D centers were under my responsibility. In the same country, there was one in France. In France, we had 3 different salary structures, one for everybody, one for sales, except everybody except sales, one for sales, and one for the R&D team. Why? Because it was considered that those R&D guys were working on the projects that would bring money to Microsoft in the next 10 years, and they were the core. They were considered, even though globally there were less than 1,000 employees in those 5 centers, who, for a total population at the time, I think of 78,000 employees when I was there. So they were a small minority, but they were considered to be the core of the business because they were preparing the products of the future. So we actually paid them a huge amount of money compared to the rest of the organization because they were the core for us. So it also depends on what your strategy is in terms of talent and what you consider to be the most important for the organization. However, generally speaking, if you're going to take that argument to say, finance is more important than HR and therefore should be paid more, this is a whole lot of not good things. Okay, yes. So, sorry, I don't want to keep my mouth clean because there's not so much difference between the support functions to actually value to have different salary structures and different ways of paying between them. It's like if in a hospital you were to say, hey, the nurses in oncology versus the nurses in, I don't know, ER and the nurses in pediatry should be paid completely different. I don't think it makes really sense. You would still have some differences. You will still have some where maybe they need extra skills and you will have to rework for those skills, but that doesn't necessarily warrant to pay them completely different from one another. So I would say that generally speaking, positions, if they're similar, you shouldn't have too much of a difference for the same grade and same type of qualification. But if one position, for some reason, is either impossible to find in the market, is the core of your business or whatever, you might say that you're going to pay them differently. I think that in most cases, it's absolutely better to have a hot skills payment or some form of a multiplier or an additional thing, but the basis of the salary structure to be the same, because especially with hot skills, those change over time. So again, I'm ancient, so I was already working before the year 2000, and in 1999, everybody was scared about the Y2K bug. Everybody thought that all the computers would stop working at midnight when we would move into the year 2000. And so all of a sudden, and companies knew it for years, but companies being led by people who are full of subconscious reactions and so on, were procrastinating and waited until the last minute to try and change their systems to upgrade them. So in 1990, mid-98 to end of 1999, some of the IT jobs saw a price going through the roof. And what jobs were they? They were the IT guys who knew the old IT languages that were the basis of all those systems in the banking and the oil and gas and all those industries. So all those skills that became obsolete before, all of a sudden became super relevant. And we saw their salaries but literally go through the roof. There were individual contributors that were paid more, not just than the managers, but also the directors of IT for that short period of time. If we had created a salary structure just for them, when the time after 1st of January 2000, when we realized that nothing is actually breaking down and we're all surviving, the world is not ending, you would still have to pay those people at that level. But if you have created a skills premium or a hot skills mechanism, you can say, okay, now the skill is not there anymore. We can take that away. Depending if you have worded well how you introduced it, we can now take it away because there is no purpose for that skill anymore. And that's okay. And the people revert back to the normal level of pay that they should be. So it's important that you handle that in a thoughtful manner. If you start to see that you have some skills that are becoming more difficult to recruit, don't just promote people or hire them in a higher grade, by the way. It's better to keep them in the right job level and pay them above the maximum, put a special skills payment, put them above the maximum, but keep them in the right grade. Because if you put them in the wrong grade to make them fit into the salary structure, because people are supposed to be in the salary structure, what you're creating is a problem for you in 2 years' time down the line, when those people will start to say, hey, especially if they're not like super senior and you can have a promotion every 3 years or something like that, when they start coming knocking on your door wanting a promotion, they're already one grade higher than what they should be, because you put them in the wrong grade so that they would fit in the salary structure. That's the wrong approach. Put them in the right grade, pay them above the salary structure. That will always save you a lot of headaches and internal equity, lawsuits, and so on later on down the line. Okay.
There's another question.
Okay.
What about risk? So how much do we consider in terms of risk as part of the job grading, maybe salary as well?
What do you mean? Can the person elaborate what they mean by risk? Is it in the financial services, health and safety?
My grandfather worked in the coal mines in Scotland before the Second World War.
Okay.
He got paid a little bit extra because he was the guy that lit the dynamite.
Yeah, okay. So health and safety. Well, it's up to you. If that is an important factor for you, you might want to pay more. I don't necessarily believe that it should lead to a higher grade. It could be that you introduce a risk premium or a risk allowance or something like that, because that person might not keep that job forever. They might move on to another less risky job. So if that's from a health and safety point of view, most job evaluation methods do not really take risk into account when they are designed for the job evaluation itself. But that doesn't mean from a salary point of view that you cannot take that into account. But again, I would suggest do it separately. Do it as an allowance, do it as a premium, do it as a special bonus, whatever, but do it separate. That would be my recommendation.
Because I consulted on a project like this actually with an airline, and the what do you call them? The steward and the host in the flight. They convinced whoever did the job evaluations that they were safety officers, that their primary duty was not serving the and they were safety officers. And because of that, they wanted to have that premium for, they wanted to have a higher grade, which is exactly what you said we shouldn't do. So
no, but actually there is probably an element of that, because when something goes wrong on a plane, you don't want your steward and your pilots to freak out and just become paralyzed, right? You want them to be able to tell you which movement you need to make to help yourself, protect your head, put on your jacket or your life jacket or whatever. But what you want to do is give them an extra payment, but you don't necessarily need to change the job. And I would agree that actually it's a very good point that if you look today with the pandemic, is reshuffling how we think of work. So that was the last part that I wanted to have maybe more of a conversation with everybody. The pandemic is reshuffling how we think about jobs. Jobs that were considered to be low skill and not really that important has now been the essential jobs, okay? Who is in the front line? The guy who delivers the food to your place, or takes it from whatever, I don't know if you have Amazon, but let's say from Amazon to your home. The person who serves the groceries to you, the nurse, not necessarily just the doctors, but also the nurses, because the nurses have actually done a huge job with the pandemic, but they're typically the lowest in the hierarchy in an hospital. I mean, in the medical hierarchy, not the admin one. You know, this whole pandemic and some of the changes that are taking place nowadays make us think in a different way about jobs. And it could be that risk management, health and safety become more important. And I wouldn't be surprised if we see some emphasis put on that in a way that would reduce the difference that we see between a CEO and let's say those that we now call the essential workers, to reduce the number of grades there are between them, and keep that in a more flat organization, and hopefully also, but that's just my personal wish, that there wouldn't be as much salary this difference between the top of the hierarchy and the bottom, because the more you have pay discrepancies, and I'm not even talking gender, let's say race or tribe, sexual orientation, and so on, but just by job, when there is too much difference, which is what has happened since, so it's been looked at since the years of Ronald Reagan as a president in the US. He introduced huge deregulation, and that's when the CEO salary started to explode. And we now have on average by hundreds of times what the CEO is made compared to the average employee in an organization. Let's be honest, even in a period of crisis, who is saving the organization today in the pandemic? Is it the one CEO, or is it the 1,000 nurses in that hospital? It's arguable. I mean, they are all needed, right? So the arguments for such discrepancies are going to change, and hopefully will reduce over time some of those inequities. I don't think it's going to be easy because of course those who get more, they don't want to let go. But I think it will come. I honestly think it will come. So,
Sophie, did you have a question?
No.
Hi.
Hi.
Yes, hi. I would just like to find out, actually I have 2 points. Like perhaps you have an employee who is already at the top of the job grade in terms of salary, and then this employee got a job offer somewhere, but then the department is willing to sort of give a counter offer, and there is no position above that individual's job grade where to place this individual. Now, if you consider what is it, a counter offer, so now how do you deal with that?
So in that theoretical case, is the person moving to do the same job or a different job than what they are doing today?
Let's say it's a promotional job. It's a senior job rather.
So I would say in that case, if you really want to make a counter offer, something which I don't like, but which might be helping you to convince the person to stay is a change of job title. You create a job title specifically for that person, but don't change their grade. Pay them above the maximum of your salary structure. If they're still going to do the same job for you, you should not change the grade of that person. let's be very honest. In most cases, why did you have, and I'm going to be, again, hypothetical, why would you have somebody who's paid at the maximum of the salary range if that person did not have yet potential to be promoted to the next level up? Either you have a problem in your structure, okay, that you don't have the right career evolution opportunities, or you have somebody who has been there for so many years that they have reached their maximum level of competence, so it means that you cannot promote them because they cannot take a job bigger than that. And that person also might have to learn to live with it. So in some cases, they might find a job in the market and get that promotion, and you might have to accept that maybe you're going to lose that person. But I would say try to keep them only if they were a top performer. If they were an average performer, overpaid, who's going to competition, who's going to overpay them, let them go. Keep them only if they're a superstar in your organization. I know it doesn't sound very nice of me from a human point of view to say, but from an organization point of view, okay, you want to keep your best performers. You don't want to keep those who have been there just for years and their salary increase because you give a salary increase to everybody every year and they're there for a long time. I've had a case like that in my last corporate job. So I left the corporate world 7.5 years ago. We used to have this gentleman called Jamal. Jamal was Egyptian and he was 62 years old. In the UAE, you normally get a visa to work until you're 60 years old, and then you only get 1 year visa, which is renewed by special approval from government, maximum until 65 years old. Okay, so we kept him because he was doing a good job. Okay, and he was a senior accountant, not an accounting manager, and we knew that the financial situation in this country was difficult at the time. It was after the Arab Spring and so on. So we were like, okay, we can keep him. Okay. One day he starts coming and he says, hey, I need to be promoted. I've been on that job for so many years. I was like, man, you should be retired, okay? You should be back home. We've kept you, okay? You have to understand. And I said to him, look, we are not going to give you a salary increase. I'm sorry. We value your contribution. That's why we're keeping you. And we are already doing you a favor. But try to find somewhere else that would pay you the amount of money that we pay you to do the same job. You will not find. So you are already receiving more than what you should be paid. Your pay is, let's say, I will make up a number, 100,000, and your colleagues in the same job are paid 75,000. Every year you're getting an extra 25,000 compared to them. So you're already paid more. Consider that already, count your blessings and be happy. And I'm sorry, sounds harsh, but that's the reality that we have to face sometimes. I would say somebody who finds a better job opportunity, it's an HR and managerial problem if that person was a superstar in your organization and you were just sitting on your hands and doing nothing to make that person evolve in your organization, because your superstars should never be at the maximum of the salary range. They should be getting promotions, they should be getting job opportunities, career development, and actually end up in the bottom to middle of the new salary structure. Sorry, but it's the truth.
Good. Next question, Active File.
Yeah, thank you very much. Maybe just like in my last, yes, I do understand and I value those comments, but then sometimes it's just unfortunate that the triangle is getting smaller.
Yeah. I agree.
So yeah,
and sometimes you have to make tough decisions, you know. I will always compare it to what a doctor says. You know, you start to have gangrene. Do you cut a finger while you can still cut the finger and you still have your whole hand? Or do you wait and then you have to cut the whole hand? And sometimes we have to accept that some solutions are going to be a bit painful, but hopefully we can learn from it. And if it means that we did not have enough talent opportunities for the top performers, maybe it means that this is an alarm signal. we lost somebody that we didn't want to lose. Let's try to prevent it for the future. No company is going to die just because one person is leaving. One manager might be in a little bit of trouble temporarily. Well, take care of your employees before that happens to you. You know, sorry, but that's also, it's not, by the way, don't just accept the responsibility as HR. This is primarily a management responsibility. What is management? It's managing your team. Managing your team does not mean just saying you did a good job and here's your 3% salary increase. It's taking care of those, trying to anticipate those issues.
Good. More questions?
Yes.
Hi.
Is it my turn now?
Yes.
Yes. I have a question though. My question is regarding the evaluation in general, the whole. Why would a company want to do evaluation or grade evaluation, since by law, I don't know if it's only in Namibia, they are not allowed to degrade or to demote people or to reduce somebody's salaries. Let's say you evaluate a situation, then you find the person is underpaid or overpaid. You can't bring that person down. You still need to pay the person whatever the person is get. And also it's also going to work on their motivations. And the other people will be, the person will be demotivated. So is it the evaluation not a risk for an organization?
Okay, so it's a very good question, actually. It is a risk for that one individual who's overpaid and undergraded, or overgraded and overpaid. The risk is, if you don't do it, you will not know that this person, you will not formally know that this person is overpaid. Yes, if you do the grading and you end up seeing that the position is a grade 12, and the person is already in a grade 13 and is paid already like a good grade 13, so in the higher end of the grade 13, the person is overpaid for the job they are doing. You cannot take that away, absolutely. And you shouldn't, because they haven't done anything wrong. It was you, HR, and the management who previously gave the wrong grade to that person. So it's not the person's fault. In most countries, demotions are not allowed unless it's for a performance reason, you know, and as a step maybe before, maybe letting them go for gross misconduct or something like that. So it's very rare. But what that will allow you to know, what should be the grade, and when this person is changing job, because hopefully they have capacity, they will transfer to another position, they will be promoted. When you replace them, you will be able to replace them by somebody that you will put in the right grade and the right salary level. You will not maintain that error. Okay, so what you do in a case like that is called grandfathering. You highlight those people, and they're also called red circle, because initially in the old times you would put a red circle around their salary in your pay graph. And what you do is that you don't give them a salary increase. You let them catch up to the salary structure. And instead of giving them a salary increase, you give them a lump sum payment. So same amount that you would give as a salary increase, but you calculate. Let's say, for example, the person is paid 100,000. The salary increase for their performance would be 3%. So that would be 3,000. Instead of giving them 250 every month, what you would do is give them 3,000 as lump sum payment, so that their salary doesn't keep growing, and that over time maybe they will be caught up with the salary structure for their grade, or they will move to another job, in which case maybe you can slot them in the right grade and position. So for those who are underpaid, the fact of doing the job evaluation is actually a risk reduction factor, because now you know where your potential problems are, and you can take action either at the individual level or a collective level, because sometimes it's a whole job function which is undergraded and underpaid, to bring them over time to where they should be. And you reduce your risk of employees being not engaged and of employee leaving the organization, especially if that's an important function for your organization. So one could argue that actually doing job evaluation reduces your risks, because once you identify the risks, you can put in place a mitigation plan. If you don't know where the risks are, you will only have a gut reaction once the crisis happens. You won't have a plan, and you could have multiple people in completely different parts of the organization, but at least you would have a similar reaction to their situation. And then you wouldn't have one manager handling it in a certain way and another manager handling it in another way. So even if you don't take action, but you know what it is and you have a plan for how you could react, you are better off than not knowing, I would say. That would be my argument.
Thank you very much.
I think there's also a, how can I put it? It shouldn't be illegal to fix a mistake. If your organization structure is incorrect, it's the same example that you just used. You know, it's better to cut off one finger, you know, than have to wait for the whole hand. You know, so if you have made a mistake on somebody's salary, don't sort of disadvantage that individual.
Yeah.
You know, but you're not going to continue with the same mistake. You're not going to continue hiring somebody at the same salary level. Eventually, I mean, even if the person retires of old age and they don't go anywhere, then at least at that point you can hire somebody new at the correct grade and at the correct level. So fixing a mistake is not illegal as such.
Yes.
Right. Thank you very much.
I have a
Yeah. No, we don't hear you anymore. Naimi?
Sorry, that was me. My bad. You can.
Yes, hello.
Yes, hi.
Hi, sorry, nice to meet you. I joined a little bit late, but I see the conversation is really interesting. I just wanted to ask a question regarding the issue of job description.
Okay.
Because I'm seeing that some companies, they do not really want to give a job description when they are asked to give. So what could be the issues around this?
But I don't really understand in which circumstance does the company not to want to give a job description? To whom?
For example, an employee, you maybe want to request for your own job description. You know, it's always an issue. Like if you ask maybe your boss or so, they always try to be defensive. It's like they just don't want to give it to you. So what could be the issues?
So I would say that this is a grave failure on the part of management, to be honest here. And it might be due to a number of reasons. My argument would be the management doesn't want to give it because it doesn't exist. They never wrote it in the first place. That's why they cannot give it to you. And they can't be bothered to write it, okay? Again, I'm sorry, I'm very direct in how I talk about HR and management. I don't think we are necessarily the superstars or everything. We also have our share of misfunctions, I would say. In a case like that, what I would suggest to the employee is for the employee to write their job descriptions themselves. And in the slides that you will receive, I will share them with Cohen later on. You will see that in one of the slides, I talked about some resources in the beginning of the presentation. And there's a website from the US Department of Labor, which has a huge database of job descriptions. They're not super nice, but they have done a lot of work around competencies, the jobs that are up and coming, the ones that where they predict that there will be fewer positions and so on. With a link to that, or even by going on, let's say, how do you call them, recruitment website, the portals where, you know, all the job descriptions are there. The employee can start to write their own job description. And if the manager doesn't want to give it, write it themselves and say, hey, and copy HR and say, hey, here's what I think my job is. Do you agree with that or not? And then that should replace. I would tell you, normally a manager who doesn't want to share job description is because he doesn't have it. He or she doesn't have it. Or it's because he or she is asking the employee to do stuff which they shouldn't be doing, which is not part of their responsibilities. And it can happen in different situations. Sometimes it's intentional for good or bad reasons. for personal reasons. Other times, it's more like, if I remember a few years ago, nobody was a social media manager. Nowadays, some of the large corporations, they have a position which is called social media manager. But in the beginning, when social media was not so big, mostly it was the marketing team and one person on the marketing team who maybe was a little bit more astute on their own personal, Facebook at the time, or maybe LinkedIn, who was doing a little bit of social media marketing. And so they started to add more of those responsibilities, and that one person would have officially the same job as their colleagues, but actually end up doing something quite different. And so they didn't have a specific job description because that kind of hybrid new role was not yet recognized. In a case like that, really, I would say it's in the hands of the employee to try and write the job description and get it approved. But what is the purpose of the employee in asking for the job description? Because you also need, as an HR, to try and figure that out to see if and how you can help them if you don't have that job description yourself. They might be asking for the job description because there is another issue, but they think it's going to be solved by the job description. A lot of times people don't really know what the problem is, and they ask for something. So you need to try and find out what were the initial reasons. And so I don't know if you're talking about a real case or a theoretical one, but if it's a real case, you need to investigate what's really, why the employee wants the job description. Do they want to get a promotion? Is it because they're given work that they don't agree with? Do they think they're undergraded, or what's the situation?
Yeah, no, that's right. Thank you for answering my question. You opened up my understanding. So yeah, so it could be that they're just lazy, they don't have it, or they're playing hide and seek.
Sometimes it happens, yes. Some managers don't want to admit that they don't know or they don't have something because they think it will make them look bad.
Yeah, because sometimes we are really abused because you don't know that what you're doing, if you are doing enough, or you are doing more than you should be doing,
Yes. Okay. I'm gonna finish maybe with one personal story. I've managed teams when I was still in the corporate world. I had up to 13 competent people reporting to me. And to be honest, I never wrote their job descriptions. They never had job descriptions. But what they did have with me, was very, very good system of performance KPIs, weekly one-on-ones, the formal ones, monthly one-on-ones, the formal ones as well, and on a regular basis, we would talk 4 to 5 times per day, actually. So they knew exactly what they were supposed to do. When we were setting the objectives, we were doing it as a team exercise where we were talking about, first, let's agree what are the main things that we need to do and the things we want to do for next year and the things that we think that management is going to ask us to do. And then I would say to everybody, once we had agreed on that, based on all those objectives, which ones do you think should be assigned to you? Which ones do you want to take? I want you to think of objectives where you will feel comfortable doing them for about 70% of all your objectives so that you have your comfort zone. But I want you also to take some things that are going to be new for you, grow your skills, put you into something that you haven't done so that you grow. And tell me on which projects you would like to work or which tasks you would like to work. I would do the same. Each person would come back to me one-on-one saying, I'd like to work on this one. And sometimes I had another idea for them. And then we would do another team meeting where we would discuss who was going to do what. And then we set formally the system in place in the performance management. Once you do something like that, which takes a lot of time, but I was like, I'm a manager and I need to manage my team and I'm going to manage my results through my people. It's not for me to do the job. It's for me to manage them so that they do the job that my team is expected to do. Then they didn't have a job description, but I can tell you that nobody would have told you that they didn't know what they were supposed to do for this week, for this month, and for this year. They knew. They all knew. So it also depends. Sometimes some organizations might not have job descriptions. I'm thinking especially small entities, family-owned, small organizations, startups. because roles are changing all the time. But unless you're very hands-on in management, once you reach a certain size, you need to formalize things. It helps everybody.
Okay, thank you.
Good. I think our time for our class is finished.
Okay.
So we're going to leave it there. Thank you so much to Sandrina for joining us today. And all the way from Dubai, your background is beautiful. One day maybe we can go there too. I've shared Sandrina's LinkedIn profile on in the chat box. You're welcome to connect with her.
Yes. Please.
And sort of check out all of the things that she shares around compensation and benefits. But I think we're going to leave it there. I have been absolutely fascinated with the conversation. It's been brilliant. So thank you so much.
My pleasure.
I will upload the recording onto the course shell, and then also Sandrina will share the slides. So we'll put all of that on the lecture notes.
Yes.
So thank you very much.
Thank you, everybody.
I'm going to unmute everybody, and please say thank you, and then we are free to go. Good luck with
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Sandrine.
Thank you,
Sandrine. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you so much.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye, everybody.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye, Ken. Bye.
Mr. Welsh.
Yes.
We're still going to go through the assignment.
I think for now, you guys have got a class coming up right now. So I've uploaded all the instructions for the assignment.